Yes, okay. Carrie Sue, please introduce yourself properly and tell us where you're telling from, and please tell us a story.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure, especially following that lovely story that just came before. Stories do connect us uno al otro, one to another. Me llamo Carrie Sue Ayvar. My name is Carrie Sue Ayvar, and I tell stories. And when I go back, I think since I was a young girl, I've been collecting stories all my life. I was lucky. I'm coming from Miami, Florida now, but I grew up in the United States in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. But I spent every summer, 3 months of every year, right here in the house that I now live in, and my grandparents' house. Yeah, I was lucky because my parents told me stories, my teachers told me stories, and my grandparents told me stories. My grandparents had all moved to the United States uh, when about the turn of the last century, late 1890s, 1900, fleeing the pogroms in Eastern Europe. Um, we're a good Jewish family, and they were fleeing the times there. And they came oftentimes having to leave much behind. They left their homes, their places of worship, their businesses, much of their family. They could only take what they could carry with them. But my grandmother, she taught me that there is one thing that fits in any size suitcase, and that's our stories. Hmm. You can carry your stories no matter where you go. And so that's one of the things that they took with them, which was wonderful. So they brought with them their stories and shared them with me. Our stories help tell us where we've come from, where we are right now, and oftentimes where we hope to go. So I'd like to share this story that I only heard once. I was about 8 or 9 years old, and I heard this story that changed something in me forever. They say that Abraham, no matter what name you call him, he was the patriarch of three of the world's major religions: Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. Abraham, Ibrahim, Abraham, and he was known for his hospitality. He and his wife Sarah were known for their hospitality to whoever might be crossing the desert, something very important at that time. They say that they even lifted up the edges of their tent so they could look out on all four sides to see if anybody was coming. Mm. And so it was that one day, as Abraham was sitting in his doorway, he saw somebody. He saw coming from across the desert an old man, leaning heavily on his staff, carrying his backpack as he made his way across the desert. Well, Abraham did not wait. He did not wait for him to come close. He got up and he went to the man and offered him the hospitality of his own home, of his own tent. He welcomed him in and he washed his feet, as was the custom of the day. And he offered him food and drink and comfort. And when the meal was done, that old man thanked him. Oh, thank you for your hospitality. Thank you for the food and drink, Avram. And Abraham said, No, 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 it is not me. No, it is not me to who you should be thanking. Hmm. It is God Himself, God, who has provided all of our blessings. It is to God we should be giving thanks. You were right. You were right. And so saying, that old man took from his own pack a carved wooden idol and began to bow down low and pray and thank that idol. Well, Abraham began to explain and to expound. After all, my own father was one of the men, an idol maker, just like the making idols just like that. No, no, no. It is carved not from God, but by hands of men. And he began to explain that the God was not in that piece of wood. He began to explain about the one true God. But that old man did not want to listen. Hmm. No, 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 I'm sorry. No, this God has done just well enough for me all the many years of my life. No, no, has it not? My God's not shown me here to your own tent and will help me go and cross the desert safely, giving me food and drink. No, 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 this has worked for me before, and I am not about to change. Now, Abraham, he tried to explain, he tried to help the man see from his own perspective that there was really only one true God. But the old man would not listen. And finally, Abraham, he got tired of it. He got frustrated. He he began to stammer and stutter with his own frustration and anger. Listen, you're not even listening to me now. You want to accept the blessings of my God and these things, and you don't want to. You could just leave if this is not what you want. Well, fine, then I will. Well, then you can go. Well, then I will. And so saying, the old man got up and he put his idol back in his pack, took his staff, and once again set out into the desert, into the night. Young fellow. Well, Abraham, he was still frustrated and angry, but strong. Strong in his beliefs and righteousness. He knew the one true God, and he just wanted to help that old man. He lay down that night, but Abraham could not sleep. Sleep did not come. He lay there going over it and over it in his own mind until at last he heard a voice. God spoke to Abraham. It is Abraham we are speaking of after all. And God asked him, Abraham, where is the stranger? Where is the stranger who sought your hospitality this night? Like God didn't know. And Abraham answered, and he talked about how the discussion had gone into this argument, and finally the old man had left into the desert. And once again, God spoke. Abraham, who are you to judge this man? Who are you to judge this man that I have watched over and cared for all the days of my life? What do I care by what name he calls me? And Abraham understood. He understood. He begged the forgiveness of God, but it was not to God that he needed to beg forgiveness, and he knew that. Abraham, they say, got up there in the middle of the night, and he went out into the night, went out into the desert, until at last he found that old man. And he begged from the bottom of his heart, he begged his forgiveness and welcomed that old man back into his tent. And when the old man finally was ready to resume his journey, he was treated with respect and sent off with gifts. Now, I only heard that story once. I was about 8 or 9 years old, but I have never been able to forget that story. It changed my own viewpoint forever after. And that's the power of stories, isn't it? They plant seeds, like a little mango seed that needs just a little bit of water to flourish. But they plant seeds in our souls and grow and grow. And it's like my grandfather always used to say, who told me this story. An old Russian proverb from where he came from. If you don't know the trees, you may get lost in the forest. But if you don't know the stories, you may be lost in life. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
I know there's some comments I have to go see it.
Such a
But if anyone has any
relaxed
questions.
telling, Carrie. Love the way you just, you just sat back and you just told us a story. And the way you finished it, it's very, very strong. Really makes us realize, when you don't have the stories, you're really lost in life. Beautiful. Thanks a lot.
Oh, thank you. My pleasure. It is the gift and it is my inheritance that I get to pass on, don't we all? And it is the one thing that can fit in any size suitcase, no matter what we have to leave behind.
Beautifully told, and just like the woman before me, very relaxed, very solid, very integrated in you, relaxed, and beautiful message. And also, I'm happy for you that you remind me about those proverbs that I've heard before, but thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. So often we can go back to those proverbs and go, oh, yeah, that reminds me of a story, doesn't it?
Yeah, actually.
So essential part of that story is that Abraham loves to invite strangers home. Is that correct?
He and Sarah, his wife, were known for their hospitality, but of course, they lived in the desert, and it's not like we had yeah, stores that we could stop and buy bottles of water, or we could, go to a hotel nearby. So it was really oftentimes something very serious, a matter of life and death, if somebody was traveling through. But not everyone was as generous, just as they aren't today. But they were known for inviting everyone, friend and stranger alike, into their home and welcoming them. And by the time they leave, of course, he was no longer a stranger.
I know a different version of that story, but I'm not sure if I made it up because I've had it in my mind for years and I don't really hear it from others, but may I tell the version that I know?
I would absolutely love that, Eric. I have to tell you, it took me almost 25 years to find another version of this story, and I finally found it. It was in the Midrash, the commentaries of the Old Testament, but I had never seen a written version. I would love to hear another version of that story. Thank you.
Yes, it's just that Abraham was informed by God that Abraham should be circumcised. And usually that's done as, as a child. But in this case, Abraham was already a grown man. So the operation was a little painful. And and Abraham was in bed, really in a lot of pain. But after some days, through the window, he saw a stranger coming by, and actually it was the angel Raphael, disguised as a stranger. And when Abraham saw this stranger, he leapt up with such joy because he hadn't had a chance to invite anyone home for dinner for so many days. He leapt up and jumped out and threw on some clothes and told his wife and opened the door and invited the stranger in. And in the process, he healed
Wow.
because of his spontaneity and lack of self-consciousness and just joy and motivation. His flesh healed. Does that version connect to your version?
I think that's in addition to it. I think that is because it goes along with the joy that he had and the same thing of leaping up to welcome the stranger. Because that does go with that. He sat in this doorway. He did not wait for them to come near. He leapt up to go in and greet him. And that does definitely go. Can't even imagine doing that in that kind of pain. But you see, then it healed him. When we're thinking about, that's really interesting because when we're thinking about other people, how often do we forget about our own pains and trouble? Oh, I love the fact I've looked for versions of that. And as storytellers, don't we do that? We want to hear it. What was the other connecting one? Oh, you know another version of it? And that's one of the things that I absolutely love. This one story, though, it took me 25 years to find another one, and it definitely connects with yours.
I have no idea where I heard my version.
I remember mine as because I've never forgotten. I only heard it once. And then I asked other storytellers to tell the truth. I asked other storytellers, have you ever heard a story like that one? And that's how somebody gave me a written copy that came from the Midrash, which is just commentaries. It's the stories on the stories of the Old Testament. So it kind of goes hand in hand with it. Oh, I see applause. Thank you very much. Thank you for your comments, everyone. This is a story that means so much to me. Um, it has changed my viewpoint, but that's what often stories do. My grandfather also taught me it's hard to hate someone whose story you know. And that's a central theme to my entire life. Everybody is a stranger until we get to know them and meet them, or at least to get to hear their story.
Great. Moira?
Just very shortly, I love the story. I didn't know it yet. And it reminded me, was a flashback, I don't know, 30 or more years, when I met a very old Jewish gentleman who claimed that on the roots of all wars and so on, there was monotheism. So I was in the funny situation, me being German, well known, to defend Judaism against him. And I just thought I would have liked to have had your story as an argument, because that settles it out. It's wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Now the good part is now you do have the story.
I'm very much into interreligious dialogue too. So if you allow me to use that, I'd be very happy.
I would love for you to use it. It does. I did find a written version in the Midrash, but basically this is the same story that I heard when I was 8 or 9 years old and was never able to forget it.
Yeah.
It changed my viewpoint ever after. So please
Thank you
use
so
it.
much for this story.
You're welcome.
Okay, shall we go on to the next teller? Thank you very much, Carrie Sue.